When I was a new gardener, if I had known to do this, it would have saved me so many tears. It would have saved me so much wasted produce. And I really want to pass this tip on to you because I think it's something that nobody really talks about. And if you're new, you wouldn't even think to do this. Hi, if you're new here, my name is Rachel, and this is part of my free garden planning course for beginners. If you want to catch up on everything we've been covering so far, the link will be down below. And if you have been following along with the course, the last thing we did was we actually drew out our entire garden plan. And when you're thinking about a garden planning course, you might think, oh, that's the end of it, right? Nope, we still have work to do. So today, before we put any of our plants in the ground, before we finalize that garden plan, we are going to make a plan for our harvest. There is this kind of quintessential gardening experience that I think a lot of us go through where you plant some zucchini plants. I don't know why it's zucchini specifically, but it always seems to be zucchini. And you get to the harvesting part of the summer and you realize you have way too many zucchini. You could not possibly eat this many zucchini. And so people will start giving it away to their friends, to their family. There's so many stories online of like zucchini drops on doorsteps, zucchini drops in people's cars if they're unlocked. It gets really crazy. And so these people who have mountains of zucchini and don't know what they're going to do with it before it all goes bad, those people failed to properly plan for their harvest. On the flip side of this, you have the other kind of stereotypical gardener experience where somebody plants green beans and then when it comes time to harvest those green beans, they look at their little harvest and they're like, this might be one serving of green beans. This is not going to feed my family for dinner. And again, that is a failure to plan for your harvest, to think about how much produce the plants you are planting are actually going to be producing and when, and then thinking through how you want to use it and whether or not those two things are matching up. So as you're going through this process of actually planning out what you're going to do with your harvest, I want you to think back to some of our earlier lessons, specifically like what are your tastes, how are you going to use the stuff that comes out of your garden, and think back to, okay, why am I even planting this? Am I ready to be preserving all summer long and into the fall, or is my goal more fresh eating, just a little bit here and there that adds some color and freshness to my meals? And on the note of preserving, if you've never preserved stuff before, specifically if you've never canned anything before, I really recommend that you buy some produce from the store and practice canning that. You don't want your first time canning something to be with something that you spent months trying to grow in your garden and then potentially screw up because you've never done it before. It is so much nicer to buy that stuff that is just kind of cheap and widely available and practice your skills there. And then you'll also get a sense for how much work is this, how much time does this take, and am I capable of keeping up with a preservation technique like this in the middle of harvest season? So as you're going through thinking about how much a plant produces and what you're going to use that for, I want you to focus on some main areas. So first of all, when you're looking at when to harvest something from a plant, I want you to categorize plants into either continuous harvest or harvest all at once. So some plants like green beans or tomatoes or peppers, they're going to give you little harvests throughout your growing season. Whereas something like potatoes or corn, that's going to kind of be a harvest all at once situation. And specifically, these harvest all at once situations are going to need a little bit more planning because you're going to get a large volume of produce that you will then have a limited window to decide what to do with. And then once you have an idea of what that harvesting process looks like, then I want you to go through for everything that you are planning to grow in your garden and write down at least one thing that you're going to use it for or one way you're trying to preserve it. And more if you can think of more, but at least one for every single thing in there. And if you don't have anything ready to go, then maybe you should consider not growing that in your garden, especially in your first year. And then once you have all of that information in front of you, you can really start deciding, have I signed up for too much? Could I take on a little bit more? things like that. Something you might not even consider is how much time it actually takes to do the harvesting. So for me, I could take a full hour of my day in the middle of the season to go outside and pick the produce and bring it inside, and it's just washing it and putting it away, storing it. Sometimes it's just stacking it nicely on the counter where I want it. But that whole process, it usually takes like an hour out of my day, and that can be an hour multiple times a week, especially during peak season. You can also take this time to go back and look at the yearly overview that we just made and think about when different things are coming to harvest and whether or not you have an unusually concentrated area of a lot of things are going to be harvested during this time, and think about whether or not you're planning vacations for that period of time. Think about whether or not you have the energy to put in many extra hours for maybe a short period of time during the season if a lot of stuff is coming together, or if you would rather spend a similar amount of time consistently throughout the season to harvest and preserve and do whatever it is you're doing with the things that you're growing. All of these things are worth considering long before you've ever put those plants in the ground, because then you can change. You can change what you're going to do. I've been saying through this whole course that changing your mind is okay. The plan that we made in the last video, that's just a draft. Write yourself a new one if you have to. It's going to be okay. And what you're going to want to do, which we're going to be talking about in the next video, or I think it's 2 lessons from now, is we're going to be talking about how to learn from what you're doing this year and make next year's plan even better. All right, so your homework, whether you are working in the planner or working in your own notebook, is to figure out what type of harvest you're getting from your plant, whether or not it's going to be continuous or all at once. And then you are going to write down at least one, and hopefully more than one, way of how you are going to use all of that harvest when it comes in. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson.